Oh, no problem.
No, even the general wall, but they didn't, they weren't. Because see, I mean, I've done a couple of there, the three that I've done here, I have listed one, two. But I got nice touch. The face is the same.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Candidate Forum at Exeter High School in the Roy Morissette Room, and also being broadcast live on Channel 13. As we know, civic participation is vital to democracy. First, before we begin, I'd like to introduce our sponsors. We have Adult Education Director Leslie Haslam, and the Exeter Area General Federation of Women's Club Co-President Jane Veyu.
Thank you, Jeff, and I'm going to just say our moderator tonight is Jeff Samard, history teacher at Exeter High School and Exeter Adult Education teacher as well. Thank you, Jeff. Exeter Adult Education is really proud to sponsor what is now our 6th Candidate Forum, and we're excited to partner with the Exeter Area General Federation of Women's Club this year. So we welcome you all. Exeter Adult Ed really likes to promote democracy, and just want to make a note that we are a community resource to everybody, not limited to this voting district, to help people who need to strengthen their academic skills, who need to complete their high school experience, who need to gain skills to earn a promotion or get a job or prepare to go to college and do well in college. We have brochures out in the hallway. For those of you who didn't see it, they're yellow. You're welcome to check it out. Check out our website. We also have out there a sample Exeter ballot and a Kingston ballot and a sample voter registration form. A reminder to everybody, Election Day is 1 week from today. Vote November 4th. And in Exeter, we vote at Talbot Gym. Make sure you bring your ID. And if you have not registered, you can register at the polls. Make sure you bring your ID, proof of residence, and you can vote and register on the same day. Thank you. Jane?
Hi, my name is Jane Veyu. I am co-president of the Exeter General Federation of Women's Clubs. Our organization is part of an international women's organization dedicated to community improvement by enhancing the lives of others through volunteer service. Our membership is at 50 members now. We are actively involved in the Exeter community. In 2014, we donated $37,000 and worked on 91 projects and have volunteered 5,600 hours. We have been serving the Exeter community since 1952. Our members are women of all ages who work together with the same goals. If you're interested in finding out about us, please visit our website, eagfwc.org. Thank you all.
So the format for this evening is as follows. Each candidate is going to have a 2-minute opening remark. To keep us on track with time, we have 2 timekeepers up front who will give you different colored signs that will share, how much time you have left. Once we've completed the initial 2-minute introductions, we will then have a question and answer forum. The members of the audience that are sitting to my left here, if you could file to the back and then around, almost in a horseshoe pattern, to the mic, this will allow for a nice flow and you'll be able to get your question. Those to the farther away from me can follow down the center aisle and then up to the mic. And when you've completed your question, you may, if you wish to ask another question, follow to the end of the line and start over. Each grouping is set up Republican and Democrat, and each grouping gets to answer one question at a time. For example, if somebody asks one question, the Republican will answer for 2 minutes, and then the Democrat will answer for 2 minutes. And then the next question, the Democrat will answer for 2 minutes, and then the Republican, and so forth and so on, until we reach the end, and then we'll cycle back. At the end of our forum, we will have an opportunity to have a 1-minute closing remark. And then we can visit the literature tables, which are outside this room, and we'll be able to speak to the candidates beyond that. Okay? So, if there are any questions to be had, the microphone is right over there. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. There we go. First opening statements.
Thank you. Good evening to the town of Exeter, members of the GFWC, and members of the Exeter Adult Education Program. My name is Paul Nicholson. I'm running for state representative for the town of Exeter. I got embarked on this process roughly 6 months ago. I held a fundraiser for a favorite organization of mine, the Peas Greeters, and was fortunate enough to get a very large turnout, of which one of them was a member of our local party, who said, Paul, you're a natural for this. You should really consider running for state rep. And at the time, I didn't think it would be a good idea. And 6 months later, I think now that it's a great idea. It's allowed me an opportunity to meet a lot of people in the local community, many of them who I had already known but didn't realize how important it was to them to have somebody run for state rep that could look out for their best interests. And I feel as though I'm best suited representing the town of Exeter in that I have a vast experience in job creation. Jobs is my favorite 4-letter word. And I've been spending the 25 years since I graduated from college working on developing jobs and helping other people get jobs. And I get a great amount of satisfaction from doing that. I worked for Kingston Warren Corporation in Newfields 25 years ago, and that was a company that was a large manufacturer. And they're still there today with a different name, with much fewer employees, and not quite doing the same thing that they were before. But I draw a lot of inspiration from them, and I found that if I continue to use the skills that I've learned from companies such as Kingston Warren to help people develop jobs, I'm doing the community a tremendous service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for coming this evening. It's a privilege for us to come speak to you and listen to you as we prepare for next week's election. Together we are all tonight part of a great tradition of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I'm pleased to say that now, after 37 years of being a lawyer and several years of active retirement, I'm a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, serving my first term of 2 years. I ran twice before and lost, and I assure you, winning is better than losing. I'm a Democrat, and very proud to have been a member of the Democratic majority that accomplished so much in the current term. As you may have heard, we restored civility to the House and passed many significant bills. We approved a bipartisan budget that restored cuts in education and other social programs. We provided important support to the community college system of UNH and prevented a tuition rise at UNH. For the first time in decades, we provided funding for repairing and replacing roads and bridges. What would I like to accomplish in a second section? I'd like to help pass bills that support early education, make a dent in income inequality, protect the environment, and a woman's right to control her health care decisions. I'll work toward reducing the population of our overcrowded jails, which are hugely expensive and harmful in other ways. In conclusion, I hope to be part of another strong Democratic majority that will work collaboratively with Republicans to continue to move New Hampshire forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that applause. My name is Frank Ferraro, and I'm running to represent you in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. My wife, Gail, and I have lived in Exeter for more than 25 years, and we've raised our 2 children here. I've been proud to represent you as an Exeter selectman, as well as serving on the town's planning board and water and sewer committee. I decided to run for state representative because I want to continue to work for you to provide a brighter future for all of us and for future generations. Our state's economy is in trouble. Our state's economic growth rate is among the worst in the nation. In addition, over 10% of the state's workforce is either unemployed, underemployed, or they've just given up looking for work. Our New Hampshire advantage is being put at risk by overregulation and too much government spending. Family budgets continue to be strained, good jobs are hard to come by, and graduating students have to leave their homes here in New Hampshire to find jobs in other states. Tonight you may hear candidates promise to increase spending on this program or that program, but ask them specifically how they're going to pay for that. What other programs would they cut to pay for their programs? Or what taxes would they raise to pay for their promises? My goals are simple: to grow our economy, to grow plentiful, good-paying jobs, and to restore the New Hampshire advantage. If elected, I will work with Republicans and Democrats to ensure that your tax dollars are wisely spent, and I promise to work to protect you from the devastating effects of an income tax or a sales tax. Together we can put New Hampshire back on the track to growth that is envy of all the nation. Thank you.
Skip Arian. I'm a retired pediatrician, married for 46 years and parent of 3 grown children. Children's issues have been my concern throughout my career as a physician and advocate. As a volunteer in the CASA New Hampshire program, I've legally represented the best interests of children afflicted by abuse and neglect. I spearheaded legislative task force to improve investigation of child abuse and served on the Rockingham County Child Advocacy Center and the New Hampshire Children's Trust. But it's in my door-to-door experience in Exeter over the last 2 to 3 months where I've learned about the concerns of our families. Education, health care, mental health services, financial problems, and the environment are among those most frequently mentioned. I understand that these are critical to our well-being as individuals, as well as to the state as a whole. These are concerns for which I feel prepared to advocate. But in order to address these important issues, we must ensure that New Hampshire's economy is growing. We must keep our business regulations and financial incentives current to attract startup companies. And we must be sure we educate our children and young adults to meet the employment demands of a global economy. We need to provide affordable, accessible, physical and mental health services to all our citizens so they can become a reliable, productive workforce. We must ensure that we have dependable transportation systems, inexpensive renewable energy, and state-of-the-art communications technology. Yep, it's a tall order, but working collaboratively with all members of the legislature, the governor, and the executive council, I think we can move New Hampshire forward. Thank you.
I want to thank the organizers for putting on this forum and giving us a platform to dialogue with the voters. My name is Nelson Lorenzo, and I'm running for Exeter State Representative. I am a homeowner and small business owner of a web design firm here in Exeter. I'm currently serving my 2nd term on the Exeter Budget Recommendations Committee, and I'm also an instructor at Exeter Adult Education. I'm involved in the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, where I'm in contact with many of our neighbors in the small business community who I feel is one of New Hampshire's greatest assets. Having the bittersweet fortune of starting my business during the last economic recession, I'm very much in tune with the challenges our emerging workforce faces. Some of those people are here today. I'm a fiscal conservative. I have been a longtime supporter of individual liberties, including the right to privacy. I care about the environment and am capable of working with those of differing views to reach common goals. One such goal was the river restoration project here in Exeter that was recently passed. New Hampshire is unique in that it has a truly citizen legislature. I will serve you and Exeter by upholding the proud New Hampshire tradition of freedom and accessible government. Thank you.
I want to thank the Exeter Adult Education Program and the Exeter Area Federation of Women's Clubs for hosting the forum tonight. My name is Paula Francis. I am married. My husband Peter and I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. I've lived in the Exeter area for about 25 years. I came to New Hampshire in 1990 to teach in the hospitality management program in the business school at UNH. I've been retired for a few years, and during that time I've been volunteering in the community. I'm a master gardener, and that's one of the things I love to volunteer for throughout this area. Prior to teaching at UNH, I worked in the banking industry. That experience, along with my graduate degrees in business from Cornell University, will help me as I think about what I can contribute to the state if I'm elected. It takes more than business acumen to be an effective legislator, however. It takes compassion, empathy, and a willingness to work hard for no monetary reward. I'm running because I am deeply concerned about the future of New Hampshire. In particular, I'm concerned about the welfare of working families and the health of our environment. Working families need a voice in Concord that will continue to support public education, fight for an increased minimum wage, and strengthen access to health care. Concerning the environment, I believe we need a state energy policy that will lessen our dependence on fossil fuels. For the good of our economy, we need to protect and strengthen our tourism industry. These are important but difficult issues. Because of our tax structure, we need to accomplish much with little. If elected, I will do my best to balance these priorities. I'm someone who puts people above politics. I will listen to my constituents with an open mind, look for creative ways to solve problems, and always keep the needs of Exeter citizens foremost in my mind. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the organizers and the audience here tonight, too. My name is Bob Goman. I'm a Republican running for state representative. I lived in Exeter for 17 years. Excuse me. My wife and 2 children both went through the Exeter public school system. Excuse me. My daughter graduated from UNH in 2013. I have a bachelor's in math and a master's in physics from UNH. My wife graduated from UNH. I'm currently employed as a principal systems engineer at BAE Systems in Nashua. And I'm running because I feel over the last 2 years there's been a divisive atmosphere in Concord, that the current majority in the House of Representatives has consistently voted to increase spending, raise taxes, and reduce personal freedom. I believe we need to return to bipartisan cooperation and work to support realistic solutions to the current problems facing the state. I promise to work with all legislators and consider all proposals relative to how they will benefit the state in the long run. The primary issue is to address the stagnant economy and poor jobs outlook for the state. I believe it's private business that creates wealth, unlike certain national political figures. I will support a cut in the business profits tax and reduced regulations for small businesses. I believe this will encourage current business to expand and will act to bring new business into the state. The other major issue I see is quality of education. We need good schools to provide an educated workforce, and the way to do that is to provide more options for everyone. I'll support opening more charter schools. I'll support incentive pay increases for good teachers and legislation which will make it easier to remove poorly performing teachers. I'm a graduate of UNH, and I believe good education is necessary for a successful career. I was able to get a good education and find a good job within the state, and I'd like to see this option available to today's graduates. I intend to support conservative, common sense Republican values. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alexis Simpson. I'd like to thank our hosts as well. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and the concerns that interest you most, but first I'll take a moment to introduce myself. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in physics and a graduate degree in religion, a Master of Divinity. Before I had children, I was a minister, a campus minister, and a chaplain for international students at a university. I enjoy being a mother now and volunteering in my community. I volunteer in my children's classes, I coach baseball and soccer, and I volunteer as a leader in my church. I am passionate about food security. I've enjoyed being in New Hampshire, where I have met lots of farmers and lots of you who are watching on television, I hope, in Exeter, who have welcomed us into the community where we really value a local food economy. Several years ago, I was asked to be on the board of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire, and for 5 years I have been advocating for a just food system. I've been asked to delve into issues of food and farming at the national level. Then last year, I had the privilege of managing the legislative campaign to pass GMO labeling in Concord. Throughout that campaign, I learned a lot about the legislative process in New Hampshire. We did not pass that bill, but as all of you know, sometimes you learn more from losing than from winning. It was an inspiring time for me to get to know the process and to get to know many of you as we work to pass this bill. I hope to take the knowledge that I gained in Concord and the energy that I have back to advocate on your behalf for the issues that are important to all of us. As Skip mentioned, as we've been going around talking to you in Exeter, we have become aware of what's important to you, and that's important to me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Grissett from Exeter. I'm running in the District 36 for state representative. I'm a fiscally conservative Republican, and your choice, excuse me. I'll try again. My name is Brian Grissett of Exeter. I'm a fiscally conservative Republican candidate running to represent you in District 36. Some know me from my past 24 years of community service in Exeter. You may know me, but for those that don't, my professional experience is broad, based primarily on economic complex system analysis in multiple fields, including environmental. Simply put, I'm trained to work with people, look at the big picture, down to the smallest detail, and then solve complex problems. I used these skills during my 4 years on the Water and Sewer Committee to reorganize the department and its methods. As a team, we developed long-term strategic planning, identified lower-cost solutions to solve Exeter's infrastructure problems. Remember the 2003-2004 $17 million water treatment plant. Instead, as a result of our efforts, Exeter saved $11 million, with the new $6 million solution being built as we speak. The team further combined 3 roadway projects, 2 water projects, and packaged them into the Epping Road Water Street project. In total, we saved over $12.1 million for Exeter's ratepayers and taxpayers. This is the kind of budget solutions we need in Concord now, not more taxes. Having also served on the Exeter River Study Committee, and after 10 years of studies, this past year I and other Republican leaders joined with Democrat leaders like Don Clement, Pete Richardson, and Mike Lambert to bring forth to the voters the most cost-effective, environmentally sound alternative, the Great Dam River restoration, and it passed overwhelmingly. Working together, we can accomplish great things in our future. We need this type of attitude and effort in the state.
Thank you to our sponsors this evening. My name is Patty Lovejoy. I am a second-term Democratic rep in the New Hampshire House. I represent Stratham, Exeter, Newfields, and Newmarket. I'm currently Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. I've lived in Stratham for 27 years with my husband, Joe. I have a business and finance background. I was a CPA with the international firm of KPMG Pete Marwick for 6 years and a banking executive for many years. I have a long history of community and public service, community involvement in public service. In addition to being a second-term rep, I've served 12 years on school board. I served as a trustee for the Great Bay E-Learning Charter School and on the Board of Governors for the Seco School of Technology. I've also served on my town's budget committee, and I've volunteered in many community organizations. This last 2-year session of the New Hampshire House was remarkably different than the previous one. A climate of civility and bipartisanship was restored. New Hampshire proved that by working together, we can advance the interests of the state and its citizens. As was mentioned, we passed the first bipartisan budget in over a decade, in which we were able to restore $100 million of funding to the university and community college system. We strengthened our mental health system, we eliminated the wait list for the developmentally disabled, and we fully funded LCHIP. All of this was done without increasing any taxes or fees. As Vice Chair of Ways and Means, I was very involved in the revenue side of the budget. Our projections for the first year were spot on. We were within 0.14% of actual. I was the prime sponsor of a bill that restored and enhanced CHINS, which is the Children in Need of Services program that was all but eliminated in the previous legislature. I want to help to provide real solutions for the practical problems facing our state. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for all coming. And my name is Russell Prescott. I'm running for the State Senate. I've been in the State Senate for 2 terms, starting in 2010, and when I was there in 2000 to 2004, I served 2 terms as well. I am a small businessman here in Exeter, and the Exeter High School is where I went to high school. I met my wife here, and we've been married for 32 years. I've raised 5 grown children, 4 of them. 3 have already graduated from UNH, 1 more to go, and my other graduated from Southern New Hampshire University. And speaking of education, this is really what we're all about, why we came here. We need to talk about education and how important it is. My children have been fortunate to be part of the community college system, and we were able to increase, as Mrs. Lovejoy has said, we increased funding to the education system, and we did an emphasis on the community college system. I hope you do take advantage of that. My business is here in town. My father started it 60 years ago, and my brother and I run it together since 1984. And we grew that business from 12 employees now to 40 employees, and we did it through what I think is a great economy that works well here in New Hampshire and a tax system that works well for the state. And I'd like to make sure we maintain that. So the first thing I did when I got back into the state senate was that I met with Governor Lynch. I said, can we work together to have a job fair in Exeter? And he came to the town hall in February, he spoke, and then Governor Hassan took over right over that, after that, and came and spoke at the job fair here in Exeter as well. So I hope that I can work again with the local communities to have another job fair. Thank you.
Good evening, and my thanks to everybody as well. My name is Donna Schlackman, and if you picked up one of my cards out there, and you'll get it on your way out, I hope, you'll know that I've lived in Exeter for 36 years, and with my husband of 45 years, we've raised 3 children, and that's all the math and numbers I'm going to do. I've served, 3 consecutive terms in the New Hampshire House, sitting on House Commerce and Consumer Affairs Committee twice as its vice chair. I'm running for the state senate because I think we need a senator who not just listens to constituents and cares about families and the community, but who will work hard towards solutions up to our long-standing problem of spending money on problems that we should not have in this state. I believe we can make families and communities strong and that we can strengthen small businesses. I believe we can do this by reframing and reforming state government to better allocate our resources and utilize our resources so that we can respond to challenges before they become costly problems. I have a reputation for working hard. I've sponsored many bills, and perhaps the 2 that got the most media attention are the overhaul of the Pupil Safety and Violence Prevention Act, which protected our public school kids from bullying and cyberbullying. The second was the therapeutic cannabis bill, ensuring that very ill and compromised patients can, along with their medical provider, access marijuana. I'm pro-choice and have consistently voted to keep government from dictating how and when women should access health care. Women's private health care decisions should not be a political football, and access to birth control should not be up to a woman's employer. Every candidate who runs to serve constituents, your job is to decide who will provide leadership on key issues that impact New Hampshire and its people. I believe that is me. Thank you.
Q&A session. If I could have audience members line up at the mic, make sure that you keep your questions direct and simple. Once you've heard the answers to your questions, again, you can cycle back into the line. Candidates, again, you will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. We will be starting with Mr. Nicholson.
And if there are, I'll just make a comment. If there are people who have questions but they're uncomfortable getting up to the microphone, if you want to write them down and give them, Debbie Canner, who's our American democracy teacher, or I would be happy to read them for you because sometimes people aren't comfortable being in front of a mic.
Hi, I'm Ginny Berrien, and past 2 years I've been very concerned about gun violence in our schools and in our communities. And I would like for you to comment on how we can reduce the ever-increasing, always presence gun violence that we find in our schools and, as I said, in our communities. Thank you.
I'm also troubled by the level of violence that we see in our schools. And ultimately, when it happens once, it's one time too many. We have, within our own school community, have had 2 instances that I'm aware of in the last year where children have had an opportunity to display the tools of violence, whether it's bringing a bomb to school or claiming to bring a bomb to school or bringing a loaded weapon to school. And I think our law enforcement community does a very good job of getting to the bottom of it. Yet I feel in some sense that the community has been neglected because not all of the information is being shared with the community. But more importantly, although these are children that are doing this, that not enough is being done to make sure that people who try to imitate this sort of stuff feel as though that the punishment doesn't quite fit the crime. And I'm very troubled by that. So I'd like to, going forward, make it more clear to students that there is a punishment associated with threatening to bring a bomb to school or actually bringing a gun to school. And I think that would be a good start to perhaps having children feel that that's not the appropriate choice. The second thing I'd like to do is mention that this, I believe, is often the direct result of stress in children's lives. And when we have children with access to video games with guns, which the child that brought the gun to school had posted online on YouTube videos of shooter games under someone else's name, I find that very, very troubling. So I think it all starts at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, anybody who's not concerned about gun violence throughout our society or in schools is missing something. We had an incident in this area recently where a student brought guns to school, and some teacher heard him saying it was in his backpack, or there was a search and they found the gun, and it worked out so that nobody got hurt. There was a large forum held at the Cooperative Middle School within the following 2 weeks. I attended that forum. I heard the school administrators talk about the plans that they have, the protocols they follow. The one constituent who's written to me about this issue thought that they did not do a good job. My impression was that the local people did a very careful, thoughtful job. They weren't perfect, they admitted it. One of the, either the principal or the assistant principal actually left the premises to go to a meeting shortly after it happened. In any event, I think it's important that guns be controlled much better than they are. Certainly, people want background checks, a large majority, and our Congress won't pass them despite Newtown. I really think that parents who have guns and have children and have to make awfully sure that the children cannot have access to those guns, and that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nora Arico, and I have a question about the death penalty in the state of New Hampshire. I'm concerned, and I was originally in favor of the death penalty. I felt that if somebody took somebody else's life, they should be willing to forfeit their own. However, through getting wiser and older, I've learned that there are many people throughout history who have been convicted unjustly of crimes they have not committed. I'm just wondering who would like to be the innocent person sitting on death row and paying that price for something they never did. So I'd like to know your thoughts briefly on that subject, and especially where it's in regards to New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. It is a troubling issue, I think, and we know that the legislature grappled with this this past year, and it was, I think, just a matter of 1 or 2 votes in the Senate that determined whether the death penalty would continue to be part of our landscape here. For myself, I have grave reservations about the death penalty. For one practical reason is that it's very costly. There are millions of dollars that are consumed by the state to address the appeals that are often made when the death penalty is imposed. From an ethical standpoint, that is just my personal feeling about that. And I guess I'm also aware of the fact that there are people that are in it, are not appropriately convicted, and certainly the DNA evidence that has surfaced year after year seems to exonerate a number of people who are on death row or have other major crimes that they're convicted of. So I would be in favor of repealing the death penalty. Thanks for the question.
A difficult question. I, like you, am concerned about the thought that there might be an innocent person on death row and they might be scheduled for execution. But in New Hampshire, our law on the death penalty is very stringent and very specific. It requires certain circumstances to invoke the death penalty. Not everyone convicted of murder qualifies for the death penalty. So the state has taken steps to try to limit the use of the death penalty. And in fact, it hasn't been used in many, many years because of that situation. So as much as I understand the issue on both sides of this, I'm not for changing our current death penalty. In fact, the law that was being proposed would have exempted a person that is currently on death row. So it's the emotional aspect of it was in there also. And so it's so specific right now that I think it suits our needs.
Yeah, Eric Turr from Brentwood. I'll direct this question to everyone, but specifically to.
The next one's in row.
We have to go in the row.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's
I
okay.
didn't realize
Not a
the rule.
problem.
I will wait for that order then.
I'm David Weber, and I have lived here for a long time and am now a homeowner. A little while ago, one of you challenged the others to be specific about what new spending would, be specific about what cuts would match any new spending that you had in mind. I'd like to flip that around. We do have high business taxes in the state. Business profit tax is 8.5%, which is high on a national comparative level. At the same time, we depend as a state more than 60% on property tax revenue, which puts us just about at the top of that ladder. So I'm wondering, first of all, for those of you who do support cutting the business profits tax, which is not in and of itself a bad idea, how you would make up the $50 million hole that would put in the current level of spending. And secondly, why you prioritize cutting the business profits tax over the property tax, which as currently administered is on the face of it in violation of the New Hampshire Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, so I am in favor of cutting the business profit tax. From 1999 to 2009, I believe the amount of revenue that New Hampshire gained was a little over 4%, and the decade prior was over 10%. And if we keep the business profits tax as it is or raise it, we're already seeing diminishing returns. About half of all New Hampshire graduates move out of the state, and that's because they're looking for jobs. And we need industry here that's mid to large size to anchor themselves to New Hampshire, and I believe one way of doing that is reducing the business profits tax. Right now, in the legislature, there is a bill proposing 8.4%, which is a 0.1 reduction. I believe that's a good start, and we can do a lot better.
Business profits tax. My feeling on that is that for the time being, I probably would leave it as it is. It is a major source of income for the state, of revenue for the state. And with regard to property taxes, we have this quirky tax structure in New Hampshire where much of the burden for our state budget falls on property owners because, as we all know, there is no income tax and there's no sales tax. The challenge here is to keep the tax at the state level, at the same level, and to continue to attract businesses to the state. I think that as I think about what's happening with the tax structure, I tend most of my time to focus on the property tax. And one of the questions that I would like to propose or spend more time thinking about and talking to others about is if we are going to lessen the burden of our property owners as far as the tax is concerned, I think we need a serious discussion about lessening our hold on local control. So my focus would go in that direction. We need to give up. There are things that we need to give up if we're going to meet the challenges of our tax structure, and I think one of them has to do with our towns and the county, and looking for we need to look for ways that we can consolidate services and hopefully reduce the property taxes. That's my thought on that.
Hi, my name's Carol Waters. I'm from Exeter. I'm also a member of the Exeter Area GFWC, and I'm asking a question from a club member. If you are elected, Will you support legislation to bring casino gambling to New Hampshire?
Thank you, Carol, for your question, or whomever from your group who raised your question. I will be honest with you, I have a visceral personal feeling about casino gambling, so that led me to try to be more open-minded to see where everyone was coming from on casino gambling. So I personally was raised with the belief that gambling always was harmful to the poorest in our communities, and therefore we as a family did not support it. So if I come into something with that strong of an opinion, I know that I need to be particularly mindful of being open to those who disagree with me. So in the past few months since I've decided to run, I've been considering other people's opinions and listening to the analysis that I've heard about what's been happening with gambling in states like Delaware and states like New Jersey, and even here in New England. And I'll be honest with you, in hearing experts speak, I've not been convinced that that is a positive direction that New Hampshire could develop revenue from. And I think that's the reason we would consider it at all, is that right? In Delaware, unfortunately, they have relied heavily on gambling to fund their education system, and in the past year have had to listen to their casinos ask them for relief from their taxes because they cannot pay them, because they are not having the income that they used to have. So yes, I am open to listening to everybody's opinions on this issue, but at this point I have not been convinced that that's the best direction for us to go in New Hampshire.
So I'm 100% in favor of casino gambling. I believe it's another revenue source. It will help spread the sources of revenue. The discussions about other places, casinos that are not doing well, I think are overbuilt places like New Jersey. But I know a lot of people, and I've known a lot of people that leave this state and go to Connecticut and gamble, or Las Vegas or Atlantic City, and then come back. And I'd rather have those people doing that here. We've had Rockingham, Belmont, Hinsdale, and Seabrook. We've had tracks, we've had gambling in the past. We do need to be careful about the other side, the addictive side of it, and some of the money should go to that side of the gambling issue. That's all.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Weston, and I'm 17 years old, so unfortunately I cannot vote. But I've been working a full-time job for almost 2 months now, and this is because I decided to leave high school because I didn't feel like it was necessarily preparing me for a college environment. So my question is, do you support raising the standard of education in public schools?
Thank you, Jonathan. My mother was a teacher, and in our family it was high educational standards were not the norm, they were expected. My mother took a great deal of time in enforcing upon me that education is what provides opportunity and choice for myself, and I pass that message along to my children. My youngest son had a learning disability, difficulty processing. He was coded while in elementary school. The solutions that were provided for a reduction in the standards that he would be held to, I found troubling. And as a result, because when he graduated with these accommodations from high school, he would be faced with the same hurdles in higher education and in the job market. So he and I and my wife Addie worked together to provide him opportunity. We hired the tutor that was necessary. We worked with the schools. And he is now a UNH graduate. He He has his degree in environmental resource economics. He's worked on Wall Street in a tech firm, and he's now an independent consultant traveling the country. He's a complex system analyst like myself. Educational standards need to be applied at both the schools and at home. We need to change the culture to achieve excellence. Now, not everyone can or has the ability to go into a highly technical field. But that's why we also need to have these standards and the opportunities at the technical colleges and at the technical schools and higher education at the local level. Common Core is an issue, and STEM are two different programs that are being promoted.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, I hope that you will have talked to Leslie, ask him about completing your high school education, whether it's, I know how dogged Leslie can be to make sure that you do that. I spent 12 years on school board. This is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. We've worked very hard in the Exeter system, the co-op and the middle school, of raising the standards. I could go on about this for hours, but we worked a lot. We started on this idea of core competencies, to say that in every class there are competencies that you need to accomplish in order to pass that class, so that you'll be ready for the next level. The school is now adopting the Common Core. Common Core is not something that's lowering the bar. I believe it's raising the bar. It's not saying that schools cannot go above what the Common Core is, but that they need to, all schools need to have there's got to be a bar that no matter where you go to school, that what's expected of you to learn. I think that we are very, very fortunate to live here in the Exeter area. The Exeter middle school and high school, I think, provides a phenomenal education. But we also have charter schools, and this is one of the few charter schools, the Grade Bay e-learning charter school, that was actually started by a public school. Exeter High School, the cooperative, began that, launched that, and it's one of the few that is still supported by the regular school system. The Exeter pays, I think it's around $340,000 that we give to them to help promote that.
Sorry about that. Eric Turf from Brentwood. So at a forum in our town last night, similar setting, you were asked about the platform statement that the Republican Party has around personhood, for fetal personhood, which I'm sure you know, is intended to limit not just access to abortion rights, but also certain forms of contraception, certain forms of in vitro fertilization. And I directed the question specifically to you because I was interested. You had voted back in 2012 on a bill, House Bill 217. I looked up afterward. That basically embodied a lot of the principles of fetal personhood. And you had said you didn't support that, but I looked back and I believe it was passed with your vote. Again, I'm asking this partly because I do feel that access to reproductive health is important, partly because my wife's a women's health provider here in town, and some of the things embodied in that would severely curtail certain treatments that she currently provides to people, and also make practice of women's health medicine very much more difficult. So I guess my question, summing up, is, this is in the platform of your party, and Donna, to you as well, but in the party of the Republican platform, to have this fetal personhood from conception. If that comes up again, would you propose or support legislation along those lines? And could you explain a little bit more about what effect you think that would have? Thanks.
I think I'm supposed to be first.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I read the Democratic platform not too long ago, and I know that as a Democrat, we trust women and we do not take a position against women by prohibiting access to contraception or abortions under the law. So I know this question is really to clarify what Russell Prescott had to say last night, but I do want to reiterate that, and I said it in my opening statement because I didn't have my pro-choice stance in my literature, and when I was going door to door, that was a question that I was getting for people. So last night at the forum at Brentwood Library and tonight, I want to make it clear that I am very much pro-choice, and as I just said a minute ago, it's a matter of trusting women and respecting women to make their own decisions. I grew up in the age, and there are a few people in this room who remember that unless you were married, you could not get access to birth control. And I did a lot of marching in both New Hampshire and Washington to secure women's rights to privacy and women's rights to reproductive freedom. And it bothers me greatly that this is even still a conversation that we're having in this forum, on the State House floor. We've had many bills that I think are very hostile to women. So I'm glad that the Democratic platform is very clear about this issue, and I also read the Republican platform a month or so ago, and I was actually pretty appalled that New Hampshire had adopted the national GOP platform with regard to life beginning at conception. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for the question. Anytime you want to get together, I know this is a very emotional question. Be glad to. You know that I am pro-life, and I am a person that believes in the dignity of life from conception to natural death. However, there is laws in our state, laws in our nation that are existing. And as I go door to door, those issues don't come up as often as others. And even though it's a very big question out there, my reason for running for office is how I stated for my introduction, to help with jobs and to help people with their economic problems, and also make sure that we have opportunity for all for education. But to get to your question about the House bill in 2012, again, my voting against that bill, it came from the House. I voted for the amendment that Senator Hood had brought forward. I also worked with Senator Hood this year to try and change a similar bill about fetal homicide. And Senator Hood's amendment, I voted for that again. And the bill that had come from the House, I ultimately voted for this time. A different House. You know, the House in 2012 was a different House than in 2014. So it was a different bill. And I also, understood that Governor Lynch was in favor of the amendment of Senator Hood. And Senator Hood I worked with as a Democrat. I'm a Republican, and I enjoyed working with him. He was actually on my Commerce Committee for the time that I was Chair of Commerce, and we worked well together. So thank you for the question, and we'll get together. Thank you.
I was just curious, what is your position on equal pay for women?
So these questions go back to...
Do I start again?
No,
Russell.
Sure,
I'll start.
Well, Russell starts.
Definitely, your gender shouldn't matter if you can do the same job and have the same abilities as anyone else, whether it is a person of your same gender or not. It should be of the same pay. Again, it's also the issue that I think is most important for the state of New Hampshire, is growing our economy and having good jobs for people. And then to have the false pay just based on your gender should not be allowed. Yep.
Well, I guess I have to go back to my days marching in Washington. I definitely believe in equal pay for equal work, and we all say this, and yet we still suffer in this country from pay equality for women. There's lots of statistics, and New Hampshire actually is worse than the national average in terms of equal pay. I think I've got that right. Yes, thank you. I knew someone else would remember having seen that statistic recently. I was really shocked. I don't know why, but it is a reality. So here we are, women who are often the single parents raising children, and it's a pocketbook issue, it's an economic issue, not only for that family, but also for our towns and our businesses where people go and spend money. To be earning less in your paycheck and having less to spend and less to keep your family afloat with is just, it's really outrageous, frankly. And people make excuses about it, and you know, there's a lot of naysayers saying, well, if it's the same work, well, it's the same job, it's the same work, and there's no reason for inequality in this. Nationally, they passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act, so this should disappear. But I think some of us are waiting because we had those little buttons on back in the 70s that said 59 cents to represent how much women were getting compared to men for the same jobs. Then now I think it's 77, is it up to 77? But it's not, you know, the cost of inflation and living and stuff is way more now, so it might be 70 cents on the dollar, but that dollar isn't going as far, so it's a huge issue, and I thank you for bringing it up.
Carol Waters from Exeter, member of Exeter Area GFWC. We have another question from our group. If elected, do you support the Northern Pass project in its current form? Please explain your position on the Northern Pass.
It is important for New Hampshire's economy to get our electric rates down. But do I support Northern Pass in its current iteration? I don't think so. I would very much like to see more, if not all, but definitely more of it be buried. Tourism is the second biggest industry in New Hampshire, and the loss of income to the tourism business from Northern Pass could be quite great. I think there's a long ways to go before Northern Pass is finalized, and I think there's a lot more negotiations to be done. But I do think it's important to lower the electric bills. Electric bills is a huge issue here in New Hampshire, and even though the power is going to go down towards Massachusetts and Connecticut, it's one interconnected grid for New England. And if you can put more power into the grid, it is going to help overall the cost. But the way Northern Pass stands right now, I'm not in support of it in its current iteration.
Thank you for the question. This is a very good issue. When it comes to Northern Pass, on this specific issue, I have objections to it because it uses eminent domain. That's the first thing.
No, it doesn't. We passed a law, so it can't.
Well, there was okay, something's new that I haven't read. But the issue is where the pipelines or the transmission lines, whether it be natural gas or electric transmission, it should be in an economically feasible way so that we can distribute electricity across the state and through the state. This past September, just last month, the state released its new 10-year energy plan. It's 82 pages long. There's one page on natural gas. Just one. And basically what it says is the only expansion of natural gas should go on the existing, I stress, existing pipelines and for residential use in that area. There is nothing else, nothing about expanding transmission. And yet we hear about the block transmission line up in Maine due to a lawsuit. The reason electric utility rates are going up 47% on average in the state of New Hampshire is because of a lack of capacity in our natural gas transmission. Natural gas is 50% of the carbon output, emission output, as compared to coal or oil-generated plants. Yet, we do not have a coherent plan. What we are totally focused on in our energy plan is a totally electric renewable society. And as a result, renewables at this point in time cannot compete. And so the ratepayers are going to be paying these highly substantial rates unless we adjust our energy plan. And that's what I would propose. First thing, every state right-of-way is now open to energy transmission free of charge.
Member, do you have any plans to mitigate the rapid aging of our state's population?
Mr. Goldman.
Years ago, the Japanese gave every older couple $100,000 to leave the country. I don't think that's a reasonable solution. Again, we have to go back to jobs. If there are good jobs, if there are good jobs, younger people will move into the state, and we will naturally get. They will have children, build lives here in the state, and the demographics will naturally move back to where they belong.
Aside from the fact that I'm a big fan of kale, but that's only going to take off a few months, I believe. So, Bob Goman's spoken of jobs. I'm going to speak of the issue that I feel is very real here in Exeter, which is the lack of housing that people my age and below can actually afford on the jobs that many of us in the middle class have. I can expand on that a little bit, but I think that's really important to look at on a local level here. Maybe that's something that we need to have more local control over, that we just try to make that part of our plan for the town. And I'm guessing that's true in a lot of other areas too, although I know there are pockets of the state where it is possible to live more easily. But that would be the first thing that I would look into further.
My name is Samantha from Kinston, New Hampshire, and I'd like to know what your position is on assisted suicide.
My first. Wow, that's a question I haven't thought too much about. Thank you for the question. I think that if I'm giving you an answer, like I say, it's not based on a lot of thought, so it's coming from my heart. I would say that if someone is terminally ill and knows that they that the rest of their days will be very difficult and full of pain, and their decision, clearly made, is to end their life, then I would like to see the laws in our country moving closer to that possibility. I read about this. I mean, I know that there are instances in the United States where people have chosen that option, and even though it's against the law, it has taken place. I have a personal friend who chose that option. And so again, I'm speaking emotionally and from the heart, but I think that if push came to shove, I would go in that direction and try to make that possible in the United States. Thank you.
I'm not going to speak to specific policy, but I tend to think that if somebody is terminally ill and fully cognizant, that they should be able to make that decision if need be. You know, I personally, and I'm sure family and friends would not want to see that, and people should do what they can so that this person will make the right decision. But ultimately, it is their life, and I don't think the state should be involved in that decision.
Hi, my name is Deborah. I'm here with a question from the GFWC.
Opiate addiction has reached crisis proportions here in the state of New Hampshire. Within the addiction therapy community, there have been 2 community access to recovery days here on the Seacoast in the past 6 months. Law enforcement officials have said we cannot arrest our way out of this and have started to address this as a public health issue rather than a behavioral criminal issue. Currently, the state of New Hampshire uses 100% of the money paid out from the tobacco settlement and goes directly to the general fund. Do you support redirecting funds from the tobacco settlement into addressing the current crisis of opiate addiction here in the Seacoast and in the state of New Hampshire?
Well, that's a good question, thank you. Interesting of diverting the tobacco funds, and I know what you're saying about it's being diverted into the general funds, and it's supposed to be aimed towards education on tobacco and stopping the use of tobacco. We had a forum sponsored by the hospital just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the governor's, I think it was the chairman of the governor's commission, came to speak to us about addiction and these problems. And it's a real problem issue. And I don't know if I'd target certain funds to go for it, but it definitely is something that we need to address. This may not gain me a lot of friends in the audience here, but on that, along with the decriminalization of marijuana, we have to look at the issue and look at what's happening in the states where it's a perfect test ground for what could happen, and that's Colorado and Washington. And we need to look at those states before we jump into any actions here. And let's see what happens there and learn those lessons before we do anything here on that. On opiates, it is a severe problem. We need to be able to make sure that it's full, the educational activities and the treatment activities are fully funded. Whether it comes from the tobacco or from the general fund, I do agree with you that we need to provide more funds for that.
Frank, I couldn't agree with you more, I think, on all of the points that you've made. As I've gone door to door, actually, this issue has come up, and I think that one of the measures that we can take is to look at decriminalization. That doesn't mean necessarily legalization of marijuana. It means getting it out of the criminal courts and dealing with it as more of an infraction, and not being and avoiding having to incarcerate these people. And yes, it's very, very important that they get into appropriate services for recovery. Where that money comes from will be a struggle for all of us. If we're taking it out of the general fund, then something else is going to have to go. And so far, we haven't heard of anything up and down the line here of where we're going to cut, what services we're going to cut. So if that tobacco money is supporting some other kind of service, then we're going to lose that service, which then puts us in jeopardy, which then brings us back to the revenue side of things, which is a bigger issue as well. But I think what Frank said in terms of our need to be able to address this problem is critical, and we have to find a way to do it.
Being paid out now, what is your position on raising the minimum wage?
I've heard some really tough questions in the last few minutes. For me, this is not a particularly difficult question. We need to attack income inequality and wealth inequality in our society in many, many ways. We're just getting worse and worse in terms of having the rich get richer and the poor having to struggle more. One very concrete way to attack this, it's only a small part of the solution, but it's a real part of the solution. Raise the minimum wage. In New Hampshire, we don't have a New Hampshire minimum wage, we have a federal minimum wage. And we had a bill last year to increase that, and it passed the House, but it didn't pass the Senate. We need to raise the minimum wage, certainly in my opinion. Thank you.
The minimum wage is a function of supply and demand. And there are many, many good employers out there that insist on paying a reasonable wage for services provided. Unfortunately, there are some employers out there that don't feel that that's necessary. And the public has a way of responding to employers such as that. And the first way is to not do business with those firms. And another way is for prospective employees to not join those firms, or for those employees to leave those firms. And if anyone's here as a business owner and is faced with that fact, ultimately they're left with one of two choices: paying more for the employees or getting out of the business. Unfortunately, as a business owner, there are many, many challenges to keeping the doors open. But the biggest challenge is keeping and attracting good employees. So I guess my recommendation is that we can all help raise the minimum wage without passing legislation to raise the minimum wage. Thank you.
Concern. We brought up the issue of guns and violence in our society, but I have a concern that there's an underlying cause, and that is mental illness and those that are disengaged from society. And do you think there's anything that we can do, the government can do, to help encourage identifying those that are at risk of either hurting themselves or hurting others, and curtail it before we have an event?
This question is for Mr. Ferrara.
Oh, it is. Thank you. Thank you. And I was listening. Thank you. Back, it's probably 2 years ago now, maybe 2 years. Probably not that long ago. Time flies when you get old like I am. Kelly Ayotte sponsored or co-sponsored a bill to look at this in relation to gun violence. I think it was in reaction to the Newtown incident. And the problem is it goes up against the privacy issues to identify people that might need help with mental health, and to get them into the system. You also have to bump up against privacy laws, and that's the conundrum here. How do you provide? How do you pass that knowledge on that this person might be a threat without violating their privacy as a health professional or as an educator or guidance person? That's the issue. And I agree with you. We should be able to find a way to do that. And I think we go back and look at the bill that was proposed and see what was in that might have been able to not circumvent, but to respect the privacy issues while trying to identify at-risk people that might cause harm to others or to themselves. Because most of the incidents that have happened that we talk about in schools are children that have problems. It's not the guns, it's that they have problems. They would have brought a bomb, as someone said, or they would have brought a knife. We have to identify the issue and try to get help for that.
It truly is a problem in New Hampshire. On average, there is a death from a gun every 4 days in New Hampshire. Now, 90% of those are suicides, but we obviously feel as strongly about that as we do when it's a homicide. And so this is a problem which we have to face, and we have to figure out how we can start to resolve it. As is indicated, the reporting for mental health problems is very poor in New Hampshire. We're among the worst in the country for that. So we certainly need to spend some time really finding out why we're so bad about doing this. Privacy certainly is one, and we in New Hampshire certainly pride ourselves on our privacy. But when it affects other people, we certainly have to take some measures to address that. The mental health system has had some improvements over the past years. Some funding was restored. We'll hope that might have some help. We still need a lot more work for children. Children's mental health services are not in good shape at this point, and it's my understanding that the money that was allocated in the last budget actually does not go to children, but it only goes to adults. And so we need to have some greater collaboration between among the agencies and the departments in the state to be able to provide better services, quality services, and to help sort out some of the reimbursement issues that also make it difficult for people to access these services.
And we're going to reframe a previous question to hear the opinions of some of the people who didn't get a chance to respond to this question. The Exeter Area GFWC currently runs a program called WINGS. We're a social service organization devoted to philanthropy within our community. We support a number of low-income families through this WINGS program by providing them with what some people might call extras. Halloween costumes for children, new shoes and backpacks, birthday cakes, things that you might not be able to afford on your own were you living on the minimum wage. These are struggling families that we support. We have applications that we can't even fill. Do you support raising the minimum wage to help these New Hampshire families raise themselves out of poverty?
It is you. I understand this is a repeat question, but...
That's fine. I love answering this question. Yes, I am in favor of increasing the minimum wage in the state of New Hampshire. I mean, I'd like to see it happen at the federal level. I think it's way past time. There are, I'm not a business owner, but going back to what someone said about the income gap in this country, I think that, given the richness of our country, I think there's no excuse for what's been happening over the last 20 years or 40 years or whatever number of years that, this gap has been widening. And it's impossible for me to think that, say, a single mother could raise a child or two or three on an income $14,000 or less. So, yes, I'm in favor of increasing the minimum wage, and if I'm elected, I will do everything in my power, if the opportunity comes up, to see that that happens.
I believe the minimum wage does more harm to the people it purports to advance. For example, I worked minimum wage. It's an excellent starting point, but to choose a number, let's say 1010 for example, I know that's been going around nationally. What you're basically telling employees or people whose skill level is below $10.10 is that it's illegal for you to work. If your skills warrants $9, $8, it's illegal for you to work if a minimum wage, let's say, is set at $10.10. These are voluntary decisions made by both employees and employers. The best way at determining what that number should be is through the free market between employers and employees.
What your view is on decriminalizing medical marijuana and dealing with the drugs that people are actually getting addicted to and overdosing on?
Well, medical marijuana will be legal next year. They're working out the distribution, so I'm not exactly sure what you mean. I am personally opposed to decriminalizing marijuana at this point. I think it encourages people that would not necessarily use it. I've been around marijuana since I was 16. I don't think it has any good effect. I could say the same for alcohol. But I do believe that the penalties for small amounts, possession of small amounts, should probably be misdemeanor rather than higher. That's the illegal use, not medical use.
Thank you for your question. I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, this is where I stand at this point. I'm in favor of decriminalization. I have spoken with people who've been involved with the drug court and the positive effects that that has had in our society, using that form of treatment for folks who have been in trouble with the law because of drugs. Our law enforcement folks are educated on the latest ways to work with people who have been arrested for using drugs and have found success in drug court as opposed to traditional ways of treating criminals who abuse marijuana. But I'm not in favor of legalization. I have grown up, probably like you, around people who have done marijuana and other drugs, and my personal experience, as well as the experience that I've had with talking with people who are involved in substance abuse prevention and treatment, is that marijuana is often a gateway drug to other drugs that are addictive, like heroin and opiates. And I'm not comfortable making what I know is to be a gateway drug legal. So, having said that, I'm obviously watching what happens in Colorado and Washington to see what happens there.
I think we all very much support the medical services that we do have. I mean, it would be wonderful if the federal government would put a veterans hospital in New Hampshire. But right now, people have to go out of state. That's not an issue that we can deal with. We do have a committee on Veterans Affairs, and there have been a lot of bills that have come forward. I worked on one that was really helping parents who might be overseas when there are suddenly, custody issues. We worked very hard. In fact, I was working with one of the Republican who was one of the senior ones on that committee, and we got it passed. So to help, because that's the thing that can happen with, someone goes overseas, and as soon as they're overseas, there ends up being a court case to take away that parent's custody rights for a child. So we did work very hard on that. And we do have those types of issues, and I would have to say that both the New Hampshire House and the Senate tries to do everything that we can to help our veterans. And it's not a partisan issue. It's not a partisan issue at all. We all work to try to do whatever we can to help our veterans.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the question. Second, I'd like to apologize for my performance. Good news, I have not been to West Africa, but I've been feeling dizzy the whole day. No panic. But I'm old Marine, gonna tough through this. In regards to Veterans Affairs, I've had a lot of dealings with Veteran Affairs. My father-in-law lives with us, and I deal with, he's a 92-year-old Okinawa veteran. And dealing with VA is complex, is the best way to put it. At the state level, we do have the National Guard. We do have programs related. I would like to see, and I've heard complaints at the National Guard level of the lack of services or support. I would, when I go to Concord, if I win, I would take a great deal of time focusing on those issues, because I think these men and women who serve their country overseas or here at home, regardless of where you serve, you've served, and this country owes a debt to them. So I fully support veteran services and expansion.
I'm currently learning 4 languages, and I think that our language programs in New Hampshire are dying, and quite frankly, I find that much of my generation is culturally inept. So, do you agree with making languages a requirement in the New Hampshire state curriculum?
the answer is, can't be yes or no, because I do not have my mind made up about that one. That's a new question that hasn't been posed to me ever. I know that by studying foreign languages, it surely does help your cognitive thinking. And anything that can help cognitive thinking is a good thing to have in our education system. So I would say in that respect, a part of cognitive thinking should be a choice of the languages that you could learn in school. I know that I learned part of Latin. I didn't last too long in that, but that was a very difficult language, and I didn't last there. So, but I did go on to mechanical engineering, and I think that's a foreign language to some as well. So to make it a part of our curriculum is very important. Make sure it does not get lost in the shuffle. Make it mandatory. I'm not made up my mind.
Engineering is definitely a foreign language for me, and I think that you're not the only generation that's culturally inept, frankly. And I think we should have language requirements. There was a program recently on the radio talking about how behind our country is. We are so isolated. Some of it has to do with our borders and not being so close to other countries that we have, for generations, assumed that everybody else is going to learn how to speak English, and that's going to be the language of business. Chinese is now the language of business. And if we talk about growing our economy and worrying about jobs and stuff, we really need to start catching up in this nation. And I don't see why New Hampshire shouldn't jump up out in front and lead in this as a state and make not only language, and I would suggest Chinese at this point, mandatory, but start it in kindergarten. Because we started in junior high. In my time, it was high school, and I took 2 languages. I stopped math my 12th year so I could keep up with the second language, but I can't speak either of them anymore because I don't use them, and I think that's one of the problems. We don't travel enough, so that when we teach kids languages, they don't use it as much as European kids and kids in Asian countries who travel a lot. But I absolutely am 100%, I don't have a problem with mandating that we teach another language and we start in kindergarten. And as I said, I think for economic reasons, we're very foolish as a nation if we don't start learning how to speak Chinese.
Thank you for the question. This concerns the minimum wage.
I'm sorry, but we've already dealt with the minimum wage twice, so we'll have to.
Well,
I
would like to do it from a perspective of an employee, which is is on the other side.
All right, no.
Okay. Years ago, I worked in retail. Minimum wage was $3.25 or something like that, $3.35 maybe. Anyway, I worked my way up to it was $5.25. I worked at least 10 years. In the store that I worked, a young, soon-to-be 16-year-old came in as an employee, and she started at the same wage as I did. She had no experience, and I am really not one to work in retail now for that reason. It's very hard today with the cost of living, medical, all these other things. I don't think people should have to have a low minimum wage and then have to go to fuel assistance, food stamps, whatever program, and apply for assistance. They should be able to hold their head up high and not be receiving welfare.
Okay, so are we directing this question?
Now, this question concerns the level. If there is a minimum wage, a hike, I'm wondering if the candidates, whoever's elected, would consider 2 levels. One for someone starting, maybe a young person, or an older, inexperienced person, however, and then for somebody who is more experienced and really should not have to get the same pay as somebody who's inexperienced. And that's my question to the candidates. Thank you.
So I just want to start with a really great point that you made, Nora, which was that years ago, and my minimum wage started at $2, I must be older than you, but years ago, you could actually, on minimum wage, pay your rent and buy your food. And so the problem is that, that with inflation over the years, the minimum wage hasn't kept up with it. So as you pointed out, and this was a really good point, that we have people, and it's not, you know, I think your second point is different levels. I would look at kids that are living at home, that are getting their first jobs, and it's summertime, are in a different category of employment than an adult who is trying to support themselves and pay their rent. And I think that's a good discussion to have. But I think for those adults that are working full-time on minimum wage right now, and it's about $15,000 a year is what they're earning, they are, as you said, ending up using our food pantry, using our fuel assistance. So how is that right? Because years ago, minimum wage actually could pay your way, and it can't anymore. So I think it is definitely worth looking at the minimum wage. In 2010, our state law was reversed so that we only track with the federal minimum wage, so we don't have our own independent ability right now under the law to raise our minimum wage. We'd have to actually pass a new law saying that New Hampshire has a minimum wage that it sets. We can't by law do that, but I think that we need to have that conversation and look at it very closely. I definitely agree, so thank you for the question.
And I think you're also correct in that certain people would enjoy a minimum wage job. In my business, I do not have many people that are making minimum wage, because most of my employees are full-time. Most I'm also providing 100% of their health care. So when it came to a person coming from the sophomore year of high school and wanted to have a job, they didn't have any experience. They didn't know that didn't know if they could do electrical wiring. So I hired that person at minimum wage, and he worked for us now for like 3 or 4 years. He's certainly not making minimum wage now, and he's also going off to college. So I think responsible employers pay greater than minimum wage. The other issue I see with just raising the minimum wage, like you say, just one size fits all, is that there are a lot of tipped personnel, tipped workers, that actually make far greater than minimum wage, usually double minimum wage if they're a good waitress or a good waiter, or in the food service industry where they are tipped. So to automatically give them a minimum wage hike is going to be difficult for the owners of the business to increase their payroll overnight. So we have to look at that as well. So if there's ever a look at increasing the minimum wage, those issues have to be resolved.
If you would support a Good Samaritan bill for the state of New Hampshire that would help prevent deaths from drugs like heroin.
Mr. Gustavo.
I think we passed that.
We've already passed it.
I think we passed it this session.
I have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure we've already
So
done
I guess
it.
we would.
Yes.
If we didn't pass it,
Can I speak a little on that?
Yeah, if you want to, you can clarify for me.
Yeah, well, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and that bill did go through the Judiciary Committee. It's conceivable, we have bills that are so much, people favor them so much, they go on what's called the consent calendar. And so if you're not on that committee, what that means is that if a great majority of the committee approved the bill, then the likelihood is it'll pass the whole House. So they lump them all together, and at the beginning of the session, they say, okay, now, do you want to take anything off the consent calendar? And anyone can take somebody off, take a bill off the consent calendar. But those that remain, they say, okay, now all in favor, and they say aye, and the whole calendar gets passed. And it may be why Patty and Donna are having a hard time kind of remembering.
It was included in that
But it did
calendar.
go through my committee, we had extensive hearings on it, I'm quite sure it passed.
Okay.
But I don't know what happened in the Senate.
So we'll direct the next question back to Mr. Brissett, Ms. Lovejoy.
Yes,
I'm not sure how much influence the state has on local education policy, but I just heard some talk about foreign languages and introducing them perhaps in kindergarten. And I'm new to the state, and I was very, very surprised that there is not full-day kindergarten in Exeter. You only go half-day, is that correct? And I think, and pre-K is also, well, there's not enough people are on waiting lists, and that also is half-day. I think if we're talking about education and we're talking about people that are going to need a job, all your studies show that these ages of 3, 4, 5-year-old. So if there's anything the state can do, if you can mandate, across the board certain things, I think full-day kindergarten is something to look at.
And which one is it? Mine first?
I think it's Mr. Grissett.
Okay.
We don't know anything anymore. Yes, young learning is critical. The first 3 years, especially for language, by 5, you're basically halfway to losing your ability to absorb language. My eldest son learned Spanish before, at the same time he learned English. He also learned a little bit of Russian. As I said before, my mother was into education, and I had to be schooled in 3 different languages, which gave me opportunity. Like you were talking about, I was able to get a job with the Transworld Airlines. I traveled the world, met multiple cultures. In regards to a full-time, I think you're bringing this down into a daycare policy and for pre-kindergarten and in kindergarten. Since you're new to the state, what year was it that was kindergarten?
The session before last is when we first.
Right, so it was mandated across the entire state for those communities that did not have established kindergartens, that they were required to establish them. I'm not sure that the legislation mandates any particular number of hours per day. Is that it? Patty, you would know that.
I'll answer it.
Oh.
No, but you finish it now.
But anyway, no, childhood education is very important, and the state should be looking at it, but at the same time, daycare is a separate issue than education. And so I would not support diverting funds for daycare unless there was a qualified programs that are already existing.
Yes, it was in the 2010 session that New Hampshire became the last state to finally mandate kindergarten. To me, it's just unthinkable that we were the last. But anyway, New Hampshire now does have kindergarten. It is a half-day. What's mandated is half-day. A lot of communities do a full day. Stratham does a sort of a modified plan. It goes to 1:30. But the decision is left up to the individual communities, as Paula was talking earlier about local control. It is an issue that's coming up. More and more communities are addressing it. I think Brentwood is one of the communities that's looking at it right now. I think it would be wonderful to have it mandated, but we do a lot of unfunded mandates in this state. And to mandate one more program without giving additional funds to the communities would be very difficult for some of the communities. As far as pre-K is concerned, in this state, the only mandated, in fact, pre-K is for children that have identified issues. There is no state funding or any mandate whatsoever for the pre-K. And as studies, and I'm sure Skip probably knows this more as a pediatrician than any of the rest of us do. All the studies show that every dollar that you spend on pre-K is returned back, many-fold. It's very important. But once again, to mandate it without giving any funding to the communities would be extremely difficult.
Okay, in order to allow for our candidates to have a 1-minute closing remark, We are going to cut the questions there, but if you do have any questions, of course, for any of these candidates, please don't hesitate to ask them after our forum. We're going to start with Mr. Nicholson. You have a 1-minute closing remark that you were able to do, and we'll go straight down the line.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I'd just like to say that the election's next Tuesday at the old high school, and the State House has 400 state reps, and this is the time to choose professional problem solvers to address the challenges that we have. You know, we have a lot of very significant challenges. 2017, the Affordable Care Act, the state of New Hampshire is going to be responsible for picking up the tab for that. We have a $4.8 billion unfunded retirement plan for New Hampshire state employees. These are difficult problems, but they're not unsolvable problems. You know, people in the capitals of other states look at New Hampshire and think that our problems are relatively insignificant in size. I'd like to be one of those people that goes up there and helps solve these problems. I've spent 25 years of my career solving problems for other businesses, for other people, and I have the energy, and more importantly, I have the desire to solve these problems. Look forward to seeing the polls next Tuesday. Thank you.
We are coming down to the finish line. I feel proud to be part of a good team. It's wonderful to have run with Donna Schlockman and Patty Lovejoy. They're very experienced, wonderful, wonderful legislators. I recruited Skip Berrien, and I'm so pleased that he's willing to run. It's been a pleasure to work with Paula Francis and with Alexis Simpson. I think we have a very strong Democratic team. I look forward to serving with this new team, and I definitely urge you to cast your vote next Tuesday, November 4th. Thank you.
And I want to thank the sponsors and all of you for coming tonight. And I want to congratulate the adult ed class here for persevering in your education, and keep it up, and best of luck in the future. I've been proud to serve the Exeter residents as a selectman, and I want to restore our economy and help grow plentiful, good-paying jobs. Our state's economy is in trouble. 70% of our citizens don't think next year is going to be any better than this year was. My goals are to grow our economy, and I want to help create jobs so that our children and our grandchildren won't have to leave the state to find a job in another state. Together we can put New Hampshire back on the track to growth, and I'd appreciate your vote on November 4th. Thank
you. Of Exeter have a clear choice at the polls. This Democratic team, which you've heard from, represents a diversity of backgrounds and expertise to keep New Hampshire moving forward. Our Democratic team recognizes the role of the state to support the common good, to support the well-being of individuals, while ensuring that the state has appropriate resources to efficiently and effectively meet those needs. As a physician, I want to be sure our state remains healthy and well-nourished. Our Democratic team will ensure that this state and Exeter are well-nourished with adequate resources, and will ensure that our resources are used well, but not contributing to fat. I have a fear that our Republican colleagues here at the table want to cut some of those resources, which will eventually starve our state of human resources which sustain us. This reduction in resources will drain our energy we need to be productive and competitive.
I am running for office to serve my community and bring much needed balance to the Exeter slate of representatives in Concord. Unlike our Democratic colleagues, I trust and respect the voter enough not to interfere into the decisions he or she makes, whether that be how your child is educated, including which languages they learn, which healthcare provider is best for your family, or what kind of milk you're allowed to consume. As your state representative, I will not look to party leadership for instructions on how to vote, but instead will ask questions and dialogue with constituents. I am proud to call myself a New Hampshireite, and will do my utmost best in upholding the New Hampshire tradition of freedom and accessible government. On November 4th, I ask for your vote in keeping with this tradition. Thank you.
Thank you again to the Exeter Adult Education Program and to the Exeter Area Federation of Women's Clubs for hosting the forum tonight. New Hampshire is facing several very important issues, both in the short term and the long term. This election is about a choice. We have a real choice about whether to build on the progress that was made during the last legislative session under the leadership of Governor Maggie Hassan and a Democratic majority in the House, or whether we will allow ourselves to be brought backward. If I am elected, I will promise the people of Exeter at least two things. First, every day during my term in office, I will listen and I will use my best judgment to serve the needs of the residents of Exeter and move New Hampshire forward, not backward. And second of all, and more immediately, I promise that I will remove all of my lawn signs by November 6th.
Again, I'd like to thank the sponsors and the audience and the students for coming tonight. I think you've heard a lot of good discussion and question and answers here tonight, but the differences are obvious between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats will raise the spending, and the only way to counter that we need to have a balanced budget, will be to raise taxes. I oppose that. I will address the needs of the state, vote to address the needs of the state on a reasonable needs and income revenue point of view, and I hope you'll vote for me on November 4th. Thank you.
I'm running for office because the work that we do at the state level, as we've noticed in our conversation this evening, has a very real impact on our lives in Exeter. We need to send problem solvers who are able to work with others toward viable solutions for the issues facing our state. I'd like to bring my ability to work with others and my passion for creating a healthier future for our children to bear on running the state effectively. In the 2013-2014 legislative session, our legislature made solid progress in restoring funding to programs that have been devastated in 2011 and 2012. Our next legislature needs to build on what has been accomplished to improve the quality of life for all New Hampshire citizens. In the next 2 years, we need to address the needs of our citizens who remain hungry, thousands of whom are children, despite our low unemployment rates and a growing economy. We need to invest in substance abuse prevention and treatment programs, and we need to uphold the legislation enabling more of our neighbors to obtain health care. I look forward to representing you.
I'd like to thank the sponsors also, especially the students who are attending and viewing at home. Yes, there were stark differences I think you're beginning to see at this point. We have very qualified candidates on both sides, but the main issue that we have, and for you to decide, is philosophical. For the last 6 years, we have had a recession and a stagnant recovery, and the majority of people in the country think that the country and at the state level we're going in the wrong direction. The solutions you hear today, and which were proposed during the legislature by these Democrat incumbents, included tax increases in gas, a pink tax, an increase in business taxes. The final budget that you have today that was voted on bipartisanly was because of one Republican senator, because we had refused as a group with that one vote to not allow for those tax increases. If you wish to have increased spending, like the $2 billion proposal, vote Democrat. If not, vote Republican.
Thank you again to the sponsors and to the students. I look forward to seeing each of you at one of the adult ed graduations. It's one of my favorite events. Leslie does a fabulous job with it. New Hampshire
graduates here tonight. Yes.
Oh, good. New Hampshire has several issues facing it that are critical to the future of our state. One being education funding, both at the university and at the local level. New Hampshire is 50th in its support of higher education on a per capita basis. And if we double our support, we are still 50th. New Hampshire can do better. We need to focus on improving our economy to help all of our citizens thrive. And we do need to find a solution to our underfunded pension system. No one person or political party is going to solve these issues. It's going to take everyone working together. I've had a lot of experience working with diverse groups, with people, and finding consensus. I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you.
I'm Russell Prescott. I'm running for the State Senate, and I'm looking for your vote on November 4th, on Tuesday. I know that some people think that running for office is all about ego and all about having a big name. But the greatest thing that we can do in life is to serve other people. I make my decisions very, very slowly when I'm in Concord. I also stay close to my community. I'm in the Rotary, I'm in the Chamber of Commerce, I'm in the Elks Club in Kingston. I'm sorry, the Lions Club in Kingston. And I believe that being accessible, staying close to people with diverse views is the only way that you can serve all of your constituents. I will try my hardest to do that. I hope you vote for me on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank the students and the sponsors as well. As a Democrat, I actually share with my colleagues the idea of fiscal responsibility, and I take issue with the implication that we don't actually have that as a value. I also value policies and actions that reflect our concern for people, and that is the role of government. In my 3 terms in the State House, I have to say that not only have I worked well with others, I think that in general the House has worked extremely well together, especially this last term, maybe not in 2010 where there was a lot of tension and the Democrats were extremely marginalized by the difference in numbers. But I just want to say that we are all in this together. We need to act like we're all in this together, and we need to look forward and not go on the rampage of fear-mongering and getting people concerned of what's going to happen when it's not based in reality. So I'm out of time. So I, too, ask for your vote because I'm running for Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the candidates and the audience. Remind you that outside on the literature table are sample ballots and information about all our candidates. And don't forget to vote November 4th at the Talbot Gym. Thank you.